All right. If you can find your seat, we will begin. Yeah. And they say hearing is the last thing to go. So we're all very much alive here because we're speaking, and I'm sure somebody's listening. Anyway, good to be here in this regular format, and I hope you enjoyed the teaching sessions. And if you didn't, well, we're here today. And the last time I spoke, I was actually in a much warmer place. You know, I think spring has a serious procrastination issue. I keep looking, and it keeps saying it's going to warm up always the next day. You know, the next day never comes. And I keep waiting to where I can go from 5 layers down to 4 layers outside when I run. But it's been challenging to say the least. You know, I kind of get out of the house and kind of waddle down the highway and back again. That's because of the layers that you have to wear to keep warm. But it's going to be warmer tomorrow. Just don't put the layers away because you might need them. Anyway, we're going to share some family things this morning, and then I'm going to share a little thought with you, and then we're going to go into open mic, and you get an opportunity to share, and then we're going to share communion together. And so I want to give you a little history of life at Westside. For some of you, you lived it, and for others, you've heard about it, and some of you don't know anything about it. And so in the early 2000s, Pastor Arlo, who was the senior pastor at the time, was getting ready to retire. And so they had to decide who was going to be the next senior pastor. And at that time, both Danny and I were on staff. And so somebody had much prayer and consideration and discussion. And of course, I wasn't involved in the discussion or the prayer other than praying for my basketball teams and volleyball teams, making sure that they won the games they were supposed to win. And at that time, I was very disconnected, not because I was disconnected, but I was busy with the school and traveling with the school and sports teams. And so I wasn't really as involved in the church. And, at one time, one year in the late 90s, I traveled with teams. We went 25 weekends. About 13 with the basketball team and about a dozen with the volleyball team, all over Western Canada. We did 2 tournaments in Saskatchewan. I always believed that every child should have a Saskatchewan experience. So I took them to Saskatchewan and took them to a place called Humboldt, Saskatchewan. And there in Humboldt, we were the stars. You're the team from BC? Welcome. The mayor was there to greet us, so anyway, you're in Saskatchewan back at that day, because in the men's washroom by the stalls, whatever, they have ashtrays, and I guess they hadn't kind of caught up to this, smoking in enclosed areas was bad for you. Anyway, so we took our kids there. And so I was really disconnected from the church. So they had this decision: is Danny going to be the next senior pastor, or is Marlo going to be the next senior pastor? And so in the end, of course, it's history, right? So we already know what happened. So in the end, they asked me to be the next senior pastor. And I don't really remember what happened with the church, but I'm assuming that some people were okay with that. I'm sure some people thought, I don't know if he's spiritual enough. He's like sports everything. And so in July of 2002, I took over as senior pastor, and I was a ripe 47 years old at that time. And so I'm sure that there were some who thought, I don't know how Marlo's going to do with this. And we haven't really seen a lot of him in church functions, because if you're gone 25 weekends doing basketball, right, We used to, when we go to Saskatoon, just Humboldt, just past Saskatoon, we would drive back all through the night. And we would try to get at church so we could drop the kids off and their parents could pick them up at the end of the service. And so I can remember coming in and driving in and dropping them off and then heading home and sleeping. And so people probably thought, is Marlo still around? Is he gone? Anyway, so now we're in March 2023. And we're now having to look for another senior pastor as procrastinating Pastor Marlo is going to retire. And kind of. It's like my last trip to Sri Lanka for 13 times. And so over the last little while, we've been really, as leaders, been looking at what God is saying to us. And so we had a membership meeting on Sunday evening, and we laid out a little bit of what we saw, and I'm going to share that with you this morning, and then we're going to continue to share something else with you. So the elders and core leaders have made a decision to ask Lucas to be the lead pastor. Now that might sound really wonderful. He's the lead pastor of one. Himself.
I'm not sure how good I am at it, just so you're aware.
You go to a race and you say, I finished third, and you ask how many were in the race, and they say 3. Okay. It's perspective. And so the whole idea is that, we need to consider what is going to happen next, and so we also at the same time have laid out that what we're looking to do is hire a full-time pastor to join the staff, and a pastor whose giftings and skills kind of match with Lucas. In other words, don't duplicate him, and so we're in the process of that, and over the next few weeks we are going to be giving you more information on that in the next couple of weeks. We hope to have, we're in that process right now where we're talking to several individuals. And, now, of course, when you make changes, people have questions. And so one of the frequent, probably most thought of question in relationship to me, when I, was appointed the senior pastor is, how's he going to do? And he's whatever I was. And so in relationship to Lucas, one of the questions will be experience and age. He's only 40. He's only 40. Just a young guy. And so what the leadership team has put in place to help him as the lead pastor, it's not senior pastor at this point, but the whole idea is working towards that, is that we will continue with our team that we have had this past year, where we have Pastor Dirk. I don't know if he even goes by that anymore, if it's just the big shadow or how he is, but he is going to continue in his role. In fact, we're going to increase him. He's trying to decrease as far as size, and we're trying to increase his influence. So we're going to add time to his schedule, and of course we'll continue to have Tom Birch helping with the pulpit ministry, and George Cron looking after communications and whatever else George Cron looks after. And if you're wondering what he does, just ask him. And so a part of this whole process is that we're asking you to pray. Pray for this situation. Again, we took a lot of time coming to this decision and looked at options, and we just didn't really see another option for senior pastor. And so this is the direction that we're moving in. But we want to hear you. And if you have any questions or concerns, you need to pray, and you need to share those concerns with us in leadership. So whether it's myself or an elder or core leader. share with us concerns and affirmations of this. And if you aren't sure about Pastor Lucas, there's one way that you can find out more about him, and that's to sit down and have a coffee with him. Or you drink coffee, right? He drinks coffee. And sit down and have a coffee with him and find out a little bit more about him. And so, again, the last component would be that the leaders have asked that I would continue in a mentor role with Lucas and the other pastor, whoever that might be. And so for the next year at least, I will be involved in their lives on a weekly basis and connecting and being available for them. When it's interesting, when I was a young senior pastor, Pastor Arlo had his connections and people that he connected to, and that kind of ended, and I went looking for connections outside of Westside for people that I could relate to, and I asked a number of individuals to kind of function in that area with me, and they all turned me down. And so it just left me with Pastor Arlo, which is not a bad thing, because I kind of know him, and he really knows me. And so during those years of my youthfulness, can you say youthful at 47? Most of you are over 47, right? The young people are going, young? 47? Anyway, in my youthfulness, I was able to go to him, and he was a tremendous mentor for me. Not only had been a mentor for many years, but he continued to be that through the years. Now he did, kind of give me a hard time from time to time by telling me how good it was not to have the responsibility, and kind of rubbed that in a little bit. And I think he has repented of that since. Anyway, you can ask him. He's back there. Not during my message. And so let me say this in conclusion in relationship. I have, with excitement, accepted the opportunity to mentor Lucas and whoever is added to the staff because I believe in God, in him, and believe that he has been called to this place and that God has given him very unique giftings that will help him giving leadership in this place. And so he does this with my complete support and endorsement. All right, that's the end of my announcement. Now let me get to my message. The last time I spoke, again, was in Sri Lanka, and I had a couple interpreters who would, keep me on. See, what interpreters do is they correct any mistakes that you make, and they deliver the message. And so you kind of have that confidence. Well, over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to get to testimonies in a minute, but over the next couple of weeks, I want to share with you a core thought that will take years to kind of unfold in your lives. It's taking time and continues to unfold in my life. I want to start with sharing a passage of Scripture with you. So if you don't look, it's not going to be up there. But if you have your phones, Bibles, iPads, memory, you can go with me to John chapter 4. A very familiar story in John chapter 4. And I'm going to focus on one verse, but I will still read a passage and give you the context of this. Because it's a question that Jesus asks the Samaritan woman. And it's a question that he's really asking each of us. And the answer is very, very important. So Jesus knew the Pharisees had heard that he was baptizing, first one, and making more disciples than John. Though Jesus himself didn't baptize them, his disciples did. So he left Judea and returned to Galilee. He headed through Samaria on the way. Eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk and weary, beside the well about noontime. Sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." You know, Jesus, is interested in encountering you and your life. And he'll do it in many different ways. But he is interested in you and I. He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" Blunt, to the point. Then the verse I want to key on this morning is this. Verse 10, Jesus replied, "If you only knew." And those are the words that I woke up with this morning in my mind. If you only knew. If you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water. "But sir, you don't have a rope or bucket," she said. This well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed?" And Jesus replied, "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. See, whatever you accomplish in life, you'll have to do it again and again." I remember they interviewed a baseball player who ended up cheating. And people said, "What happened?" He said, "I had this one phenomenal year where I hit with high average, I hit home runs, I had lots of RBIs, and people began to expect that from me, and I couldn't live up to it. So I cheated." And he was able to prolong his career. He was able to do things because where he had an injury that would take months to heal, it would heal in weeks. He was able to get back playing again, and he was able to really put together a Hall of Fame resume. Only today he's still not in the Hall of Fame because they caught him cheating. And you know, whatever you accomplish in life is only as good as what you've accomplished lately. And so there's that continual pressure. That's what that water will quench your thirst, but only for a short period of time. Then you got to go get more. Jesus said, "Anyone who drinks this water will become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give them will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life." If you only knew the gift God has for you. So we're going to come to communion later on. And communion to me is about a number of things. But one of the things that speaks to me about communion, and one of the things I try to take away every time I share in communion, is my value. It's my value. Because every time we share in communion, we remember what Jesus did. And what Jesus did was what the Father asked him to do because the Father valued you and me. And the Father wanted to spend time with us, wanted to be with us, but couldn't be with us because our sins separated us from him. So he sacrificed his Son so that he could relate to you and I. So every time I remember that, I'm drawn back to the value that God placed in me. He valued me enough to sacrifice his Son so that he could come and dwell and live in me. That means he valued you. Rick Johnston and I, a couple of old guys, read every Monday morning. Well, sometimes we miss that. You know how that happens, right? No, it's not that we forget. Something else comes up or whatever. And, God's very gracious, He gives you what you need even if you're not looking for it. So Rick found a book in the entrance of his apartment. Now, Rick and a book, that's not a new thing, but in the entrance of his apartment? We're not talking about the church or church library or anything else. We're talking about the entrance of apartment. Is that correct, Rick? That's where you found the book? And so we were kind of getting, what's our next book? And he was talking about wanting to read this book, and so we started reading it. And by the magic of me contacting George and him putting it on the screen, I'm going to put a quote up there right now. Okay? So we're going to look at this together. This quote will be on the website, George? Yeah, well, no, but if you can put it on the website too, because people are going to want to go back and look at this because they won't remember. Even though the first word says remember, right? That's the first signal. See, pressure. If I tell you to remember, it's going to be harder. Remember, what you believe about yourself never defines you. So if you look at the story of the Samaritan woman, what she believed about herself wasn't who she was. It's who she saw herself or who others saw herself to be. Only what your Father believes about you truly defines you. So if we take communion, what does He say about our value? If He's sending His Son to relate to us, what is He saying about our value? He's saying you're valuable. Do you realize that? Or are you trying to prove that? Your beliefs and perceptions, however, do define the experience you have in this world. And that's why many people underachieve in relationship to what God has for them. Because they see themselves by what they feel or what they think about themselves. Or, even worse, they see themselves as other people have spoken about them. But what really defines us as believers, particularly as believers, is what God says about us. It's what God says about us. He goes on in the book to say this. By the way, I think I had to pay something like $40 for that book. It's out of print. It's hard to find. Now, people like Michael Eaton and other people who scour the internet more thoroughly than I find them cheaper. How much did you pay, Michael? How much? It's painful. It's painful. He goes on to say this in the same time that he was sharing this quote. He says, to believe in Jesus is to believe like Jesus. And to believe like Jesus is to believe in your risen self. You have been transformed by Him. And He dwells in you. The question is, do you believe what He sees, what God sees, or do you believe what you are experiencing? Or what you think about yourself? To believe like Jesus is to believe in your risen self because you have been raised with and in Him today. So if you see yourself as He sees you, then you're going to find great joy in all that He has for you. If not, the circumstances of life will determine whether you achieve or don't achieve. Your circumstances will dictate how you see yourself. And it's very, very, very up and down. Very, very difficult. So over the next number of weeks, I'm going to share more in relationship to that. And how can I build that truth into my life? How can you build that truth into your life? How can we live as overcomers? Jesus told us Later in John, he says, in this world you will have trouble. So it's not maybe you will have trouble. But take heart, because I have overcome. And what he was saying is, if you understand who you are, you also have overcome. Because if I've overcome and I'm in you, and have brought transformation into you, then you are an overcomer as well. The question is, how are you living? Are you living as an overcomer, or are you living defeated? Do you understand that? Do you really? Because the proof is in how you live. And all you have to do is stop and take a look at your life and realize, am I living in the value and in the truth of what God says about me, or am I living in the lie and the deceptive picture that the enemy wants to paint for me, or that others are painting for me? So Pastor Lucas is going to come this time, and we're going to open this up for people to share. And later on, we're going to come back and we're going to share in communion. And when you take communion this time, I want you to think about your value and how valuable you are to God. Because remember, God is timeless. And so when it says, for God so loved the world, He saw the world completely, beginning to end. And included in that world was you and I. And everybody who's going to be born, and everybody who was born, and everybody who lived, and everybody who will live. So He loved us when He made these decisions to relate to us. That means you. And quite often we always think about it being, oh yeah, the world, He died for the world. He died for those people in Sri Lanka. No, He died for you, which makes you valuable.